All right, so here we are. Hopefully, you guys can hear me. Hopefully, you can see. I'm gonna just start with a fresh Blender scene. So let's wait for a moment until everyone is able to join us. Okay. And what I'll do my best. If you want to keep your Google Meet stream open, that's cool. I'll keep an eye. I'll try to keep an eye on both in terms of comments, both the YouTube and the Google Meets. The Google Meets comments, I will be able to respond to. No, regardless, there's gonna be a delay. Regardless, there's gonna be a delay because YouTube is a little bit delayed. All right. All right, so everyone can see my screen okay. All right. All right, guys. So let's get started. So this is Blender. Everyone has Blender loaded, open, ready to go. Good, good. Now you'll notice that my Blender scene is a little different. I have this dummy character and a few boxes and a ground plane. And that's simply because in Blender you're able to redefine what your startup scene looks like. But by default, you should just have a cube and a camera and a light. And you can see in here it'll say cube, camera, and light. And so you'll have this, right? You'll have your camera and you will have a cube in the center of the screen. All right. So I'm just going to delete everything here. So let me also turn on screencast keys. All right, so let's just talk through the interface of Blender and kind of go from there. Yeah, I don't have the default cube. I don't know if you caught what I said, but I've changed my default setup here. And I'm going to do something really kind of out of the ordinary for me. I am going to change my default settings. So if you guys are with me, I'm going to change my settings here. Go to Edit, Preferences, and we're going to go to Input. All right, and if you're on a laptop and you don't have a mouse, you'll absolutely want a mouse. So there are a few things that you want to do. If you're on a laptop, no mouse, you want to check this on, emulate 3-button mouse. Okay, emulate 3-button mouse. Okay, and what that basically does, it allows you to, by default, the tumble navigation in Blender is middle mouse drag. So you middle mouse and you drag and you can tumble around like so. All right, and then to zoom is holding down Control and middle mouse will allow you to zoom in, zoom out. And then Shift and middle mouse allows you to pan around your scene. So you can imagine if you do not have a middle mouse, how like difficult it will be to operate in this program. But thankfully, there is a there's a fix, and it's that setting I just clicked or that I mentioned. Emulate 3-button mouse in our Blender preferences. So edit, preferences, input, emulate 3-button mouse. Make sure that's checked on. And what that does is it allows you to replace the middle mouse button with Alt and left mouse. So you can hold down Alt and left mouse and it'll operate the same as the middle mouse would have. Okay. And then you can tumble. And then to zoom, it's Alt and left mouse again to replace the middle mouse functionality in addition to Control. So Control Alt middle mouse, or sorry, Control Alt left mouse to zoom in, zoom out. And then Shift Alt and left mouse to pan. Okay, so this is something you'll ultimately want to get to the point where it's just muscle memory. It's like second nature. Tumbling, navigating your scene. You want your fingers to just go where they're supposed to go when it's time to move. Alternatively, you can go up to here to this XYZ axis, and you can rotate your scene from there as well with your mouse. So I can hover my mouse over here, just click, and then rotate like so. I can click on one of the letters, X, Y, or Z, to immediately rotate to that particular view. Okay. But generally speaking, we'll usually use our keyboard. Oh yeah, you can also zoom in and zoom out with the scroll mouse, the mouse scroll. All right. Okay. Cinema 4D is definitely another program I have not tried, but it looks really cool, especially for motion graphics. All right. So, any questions so far? All good? All right. Okay, so just take maybe 30 seconds or so, just zoom in, zoom out, rotate, and pan. And just make sure you are very comfortable and familiar with those operations. You will be using them all the time. Okay. All right. So next, we're gonna go to back to preferences, and we can go to key map this time, and then just check to see what this says here. Select with mouse button. Is it set to left or right? And the strange thing about Blender. And it's just kind of like a holdover from when I started using it, like years and years ago. It was a unique application in that to select things, you had to use the right mouse button instead of the left mouse button. Now they've since changed the default to left mouse instead of right. And so I find that there's a bit of a when I'm talking to students, they're having they're pressing slightly different buttons than me. So what I think I might do is, and this is a kind of a first for me, I'm going to switch my default mouse button to left. I don't know exactly, what other kind of ramifications this will have. I don't think it will have major ramifications, but I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I have this set to left. Spacebar action, you have different options here. So it either will play on our timeline. So if you have animations, you'll see your animations play. Or if you're doing a simulation, you'll see your simulation get calculated. You can set it to tools. You can set it to search. Search is handy for some people. If they don't know how to find everything, you can kind of just press the spacebar. It'll bring up a little search dialog. You can type in the command that you want, and it it'll do that. So it's up to you. The YouTube link is not in Canvas, not yet, no. To Mahir. I can put the YouTube link on Discord though. And at the end of the class, I'll put it on Canvas. So you will of course be able to kind of go back and access this. But let me just, I'll bring up Discord. I'll put this in there. All right. All right, so so I have this set to left. For me, I leave this set to play, and if you want to get to that point, if you ever want to know what all the hotkeys are and the key bindings, if you like that, if you want to customize things, you can go in here and you just see what's what. You can basically see what button does what, and Blender has very powerful and extensive options for key bindings. So you know, you can kind of go in here and kind of tweak to your heart's content, customize to your heart's content. I've never personally kind of ever done that. I've just adapted to its workflow. But yeah. So that's basically that. So I've just changed this. If you are happy with this, you can go ahead down here to the sandwich option at the bottom left. And you can just save those preferences. Auto save for me is already turned on, but I'll just hit save preferences anyways. And then now I should be good. Okay. All right, so let's see how this works if left mouse select. So now I'm left mouse selecting. I'll have to get used to this, but anyways, it's fairly straightforward. You can tell something's selected by it has an orange outline around it. Okay, so that definitely means it's selected. You can select multiple things by dragging. You can drag a box around things. There's something in Blender called the active selection, and the active selection is basically the most recently selected object, or the or in some cases, if I select something first and then if I shift and drag select other things, that thing I selected first will be the active element. But if I click one thing and then shift click another thing, then shift click another thing, and then shift click another thing, the most recent thing I clicked on will be the active selection. Okay, and that becomes important in other areas, but it's just something to be aware of, that not only is everything selected, but sometimes there is also an active selection. If I have nothing selected here, I select a bunch of things, it does give me a default active selection. There are some cases where you don't have an active selection in Blender. So there, in that case, you see I deselected something that was selected by holding down Shift and clicking on it again. So now these two things are selected, but I have no active selection in that. I have no thing with a bright orange outline, right? So what that basically means is I can move these, right? But Blender does not know that if I want to do a specific operation, it doesn't know which one I'm talking about, because neither is the active selection. Okay, but anyways, to select, deselect, select is just left click on something, box drag to select a bunch of things. You can hold control to drop a selection, okay, to drag, drop a selection. You can hold shift to add or subtract from whatever your selection is. Okay, first it will become the active element. First time, if it's already selected and you hold down shift and select it, it will become the active selection by turning bright orange. And then the second time you click on it, it will drop the selection. All right. Okay. Yeah, so there's the Google Meet or the YouTube link on Google Meet. Okay. All right, and so Ricardo, the way you use Blender with a drawing tablet, I'll just quickly show you. I'm just bringing up my Wacom tablet properties here. So what you would want to do, and this is probably a little easier in Wacom tablet versus a Huion or a Gaomon or something similar. Just because you can have custom kind of key sets for different applications. So what I would do with Blender open here, I'll click on this plus over here in my pen tablet settings, and I'm going to look for that application Blender. Okay, and I see it here, and now I can say what I want each button to do. So this will by default be left click. This one of these I want to set to middle click, and then one of them I want to set to right click, and that's basically it. That's all you really want to do to be able to use your stylus in Blender. Okay, cool. All right. So let's talk about how to move things around, how to rotate things, how to scale things. Okay. So there's 3 hotkeys you want to remember. They're fairly easy to remember. G, R, and S. So G for grab, all right, which is basically move. R for rotate, and then S for scale. So try it out. Select something. Oh man, I'm trying to right click select and it's not working. This is gonna be fun. So I click on select something, I press G to grab it. Now I don't have to hold G, I just have to tap it. And I basically change modes. I go into grab or / move mode. Okay, and the way it works is my object is immediately attached to my mouse. Wherever I move my mouse in screen space, that object is going. To drop it, I have to tap or left click again, okay, to drop it. Okay, so again, select it, G to go into move mode, left click to drop it somewhere, and leave it. Okay, we can try rotate as well. So tap R to just go into rotation mode, and you'll see that it rotates. You'll notice that my cube rotates from its corner, and that's because of the way I set it up. And we'll talk more about that in a future lesson, but for you guys, it should rotate from its center. And you'll see that little yellow dot. That's basically where it rotates from. Okay, again, it'll rotate in screen space. Rotation has a unique property where if I tap it twice, so if I press R again, then I can kind of tumble this the rotation here. So I can actually rotate it forwards and back and side to side. Okay, but if I just tap R once, you'll just see it pivots almost as if I project a ray straight through, it's rotating around that ray from the camera view. All right. And then of course scaling, you can tap S to scale this thing up and down. Now I deliberately, for my purposes, because I'm, thinking about how I want this stuff to eventually land in a video game environment, I put my pivot points at the corners of my boxes. So if I scale this, it always stays stuck to the ground. It doesn't scale through the floor or anything like that. And if I had it up against the wall, it would scale, wouldn't poke through the wall. It would just kind of scale into the space, into the room. So we'll talk about strategic placement of pivot points later on, but you'll see they're all set up in the same way. Okay, and this character's pivot point is at his foot. as well. So we'll talk about how to do that, but for now, it's just kind of neat to see how that's been done and why that's been done. So Jordan, thanks. Yeah, that I was not fully aware of. Okay, neat. So yeah, you can. So that's one way of doing it. There's another way that I was going to mention, where you can, when you're moving, or rotating or scaling, you can tap the axis that you want to bind to. So I can press G here to go into move mode. Then I can press Z to bind the movement to the vertical axis. Okay, so it only moves up and down. Okay, and then to take it one step further, I can type in a unit amount, such as say 2. And it'll immediately snap 2 units above its current position. So G here, Z, and I'm just tapping. I'm not holding anything. I'm just tapping each of these keys. G, tap Z, and then tap 2, and you'll see it'll jump up 2 units. And then I have to left click again to confirm its placement. Okay, or I can press enter. Okay, now in the middle of a transformation, so I can be here in grab mode and moving it around, but I'm like, oh, I didn't mean to move that. I want it to be back in its original spot, but I don't know exactly where that was. You can either press the escape key or the right mouse button, and it'll snap back to its original position. Okay, and that'll work for any kind of transformation. So I could be rotating this, and oops, I want it to be right back to where it was, but I want it to be very precise. I can just right click and it'll snap back to its original spot. Okay, or I can press escape to get the same result. Okay, so in general, we can confirm something's placement or transformation by left clicking or pressing enter. Okay, and we can cancel its transformation by right clicking or pressing escape. So okay. Additionally, oops, oh man, I'm still trying to select with the right mouse. Additionally, we can scale or transform in 2 axes simultaneously. So if I press G here to go into move mode, say I want to move on the X and Y axis, which is the horizontal plane. The vertical axis is Z. So I want to not move in Z, so if I tap Z here, you see I'm just moving on Z. If I tap X here, you see I'm just moving in X. If I tap Y, you'll see I'm just only moving in Y. But say I want to move in X and Y simultaneously. What I can do is I can tap Shift or hold Shift and then tap the axis I want to exclude from my transformation. So Shift, Z for example, will allow me to move on this horizontal plane. Like so, okay? Or Shift X will allow me to move on this vertical plane. Whoops. So G, Shift X, right? Like so. All right, so spend a few minutes and just kind of familiarize yourselves with transformations. Try constraining your movements to a certain axis. Okay, so I can rotate, for example, rotate on x-axis. Oops. Rotate on x-axis. And I want to rotate, say, 45 degrees. I'll type 4-5. And then I'll left click or press enter. All right. So yeah, Aiden, that is absolutely an option, and some people prefer to do that. Yeah. So if you're coming from like Maya or most other 3D applications, that's how it works. And yes, so there's a gizmo. You can use the gizmo. It's over here on the left hand side. You can click on this, and you can basically use that to to rotate and or to move here. And if I press R to rotate, it can rotate like so, or you can get the scaling gizmo and do that. And here's a multi-transform gizmo. Okay, so some people prefer this. There's another cool thing we can do in Blender. Right now, all these transformations we've done have been recorded. Basically, these are objects, and these are objects in 3D space, but really they're transformation spaces. They're containers, and you can kind of think of them that way. So each one's a container. This one has some geometry that looks like a cubic shape, or a rectangular prism at this point. But basically, all the transformations I've done have been recorded. So I'm actually transforming the space that this geometry lives within. So if I were to scale this on Z, I'm actually transforming the space as opposed to the object directly. So to see the result and to make changes there, you'll see on the right hand side here, there's this orange box, and that's going to give us all of our object level properties. Okay, and you can see all my location transformations have been changed here. I can actually move it from within this field, like so. All the rotations as well have been recorded here, and I can see all the scale changes I've made are also here. Okay, so for the programmers, I think this is like, oh cool, that's how I want to work on this thing. And you can highlight one of these fields, you can drag, and you can put a value into all of them simultaneously. So I can go back to my cubic size by just putting the same number in each of these fields. Okay, same thing for rotation. I can zero out the rotation, so it's back rotated the way it normally was, and I can zero out its position as well. Put it back in the center of the world. Another way we can clear out the rotations or the transformations or the the movements or the scale. Let's just scale this in a weird way. Rotate it. So you can actually so instead of using so you can do Alt plus G clear movement. Alt plus R to clear rotation, and Alt plus S to clear the scale. So try that. Try doing some rotation or scale or movement on your object, and then hold down Alt and then press R, and you'll see it'll zero out the rotations, right? Like here. And keep an eye on the location. If I hold Alt and then press G, Alt G, it'll clear out the location. It'll zero that back out. And then if I do the same thing for scale, Alt S, it'll zero out the scale. Oh, and here's another thing. If you're having results that aren't doing, you could also do Control Z, but there might be a certain situation where you've rotated it, right? You've rotated, you rotated it, but then you scaled it, and then you've moved it, and you like the position, you like the scale, but you don't want to touch the, but you just want to touch or fix the rotation. So if I press Control Z, you'll see it'll undo the things that I like, right? So so sometimes you just want to isolate one of the transformations and get rid of that. But yeah, you know, you could also use Control Z to some degree. To redo, you can go to Edit, Redo, but also look at the hotkey. And strategically, guys, as you're learning new programs, look at hotkeys. So don't go to the menus and look at, okay, Control Z is undo. Redo is Shift Control Z. So then you just relearn the hotkey that way. Control Shift Z. And it's here. But if I just want to clear out the rotation now, I can press Alt R. And then now it's back to its original rotation. And in general, you can hover over any field in Blender and it will tell you if there's a hotkey for it. So I can hover over here, the select, and it'll tell you the hotkey, which is W. And you'll see it's cycling through different modes. We can talk about that. So by default, if I left mouse and drag, it gives me a box selection. But I can change that. If I want this to be more of a lasso shape, I can change this. I can click and hold on this, excuse me, and change this to a lasso. So now I can get a more customized kind of selection. Okay. To drop a selection, there's a few different ways. Again, we can hold down Shift and click on things to drop the selection, or we can hold down Control and drag around it to drop the selection, or we can just drag in empty space. Okay, you could just drag, make a selection in empty space, and it will drop the selection that way as well. Okay. All right. So, a couple other things we want to learn. So there's also one other really important way to drop selection. We can either really quickly double tap A. So you tap A really quickly 2 times. Looks like I pressed it 3 times there, but if you tap it really quickly 2 times, wow, it's getting 3 presses. Weird. If you tap it quickly 2 times, it will drop the selection, or you can hold down Alt and then press A, and it will drop the selection as well. In general, Alt is almost like a nullifier modifier. So Alt, as you can see, Alt plus G clears out the movement, Alt plus R clears the rotation, Alt plus S clears the scale. Alt plus A clears out the selection. And so I think by that logic, A, if you think about it, A will actually select everything. So single tap on A will select everything in your scene. Everything visible, at least. Okay, Alt A will drop the selection. A will select it. Double tapping A quickly will also drop the selection. Okay, left mouse dragging away from our geometry will drop the selection. Holding down Control and dragging around our selection will also drop whatever is in that selection. Yep, Ravager, we will take a break. Why don't we go for about 10 more minutes and then we'll take a short break. Cool. Is everyone with me still, or am I going? I don't think I'm going that fast, but you know, we do want to get some reps in and practice this stuff. Okay, so 2 more things, and then we'll go for a break. All right, so let's select something, anything, or 3 more things. We're going to learn how to hide things. How do you make... Oh, so you can either tap the W key and they'll cycle through the different modes. Or you can just click and hold on the up here in our selection box and then go for select lasso. If for whatever reason you don't see these tools on the left hand side, you can toggle open and close the tools dialog by tapping the T key. So T for tools. Okay, if it's hidden, you'll also see a little arrow here that you can click on to pop it back out. Okay, T to open and close that. Alright, and then another thing that we want to do. So we're going to learn about hiding things and unhiding them, and we're going to learn about deleting things as well. And we're going to learn about duplicating things. Alright, so to hide something, can anyone guess what we press? So H to hide. Alt plus H is unhide. Okay. So H to hide, Alt H to unhide. Why do you want to hide? Sometimes, you know, you have maybe something in your scene. There's a little box there and it's covered by other box, but maybe I want to hide this big one. So I can select it, press H, move this one out of the way, and then I can press Alt H to unhide the previous box. Okay, and then, you know, my guy's in there, so let's hide this one more time. Hide that. Move him, right? Move him using G, and then I've done Shift Z here to make sure he stays on that ground plane. Move him out of the way. Press Alt H to unhide that box again. Okay, so again, you press the key, H in this case, to do the action, and then Alt plus that key to nullify the action. Okay. All right, so 2 more things. Let's talk about duplication. How do we duplicate something? So I'll select an object here. To duplicate it, I simply press Shift D. Shift D will duplicate. Okay, you'll notice when you duplicate something, it immediately goes into movement mode. Okay, it immediately is kind of stuck to my cursor and it moves. While it's in that mode, I can switch it. I can say instead I want it to go to rotation mode by tapping the R key, or I want it to go into scaling mode by tapping the S key. Okay. Additionally, I could also press an axis and, you know, scale it on a certain axis, or rotate it or move it on a certain axis. Right? All those options are still available to me. To confirm the operation, I have to left click or press enter. Okay, just like I would if I were just using the regular transformation. All right. Yes, hider. So yeah, that's Alt basically will nullify or remove whatever thing you've applied. Yes. Okay, so now we have all these extra objects. Shift D, Shift D, Shift D to duplicate. All right. And now I want to delete some stuff. So let's select a few things. How do we delete? We can press the delete key. Right? Or we can press the X key. X is going to give us a few more options. So usually I recommend pressing X to delete. It's going to give us a little dialog. Delete, okay, and just go ahead and confirm, yes. Okay, so now we know how to We know how to move things. We know how to rotate things. We know how to scale them. We know how to clear out the movement, rotation, and scale. We know how to select and deselect. We know how to duplicate. Shift D to duplicate. Shift D to duplicate. Whoops. I put 2 Ds. That's appropriate. So Shift D to duplicate, and to delete something, we press X to delete, and H. We can hide things with H. We can unhide things with Alt H. All right. One very last thing that we should cover is how to add a new object. Okay, so we're given a few things, but how do we make new things? You can go up here to add, right? But there's a hotkey for that as well. And you'll see if I hover over it, it's telling us what the hotkey is. It is Shift A. Okay, Shift A to add. Okay, Shift A. I get a little dialog. What I want to add, generally speaking, at this point we're going to want to add a mesh. If you remember last year, we added a grease pencil. Okay, we would make a blank grease pencil. We would change the mode on the grease pencil so we could draw with it. But for now, we're just going to add a mesh. We can add a cube, a circle, UV sphere, etc. A whole bunch of different things. Let's add a cylinder. Down here, right as soon as I add it, you'll see that there's this little kind of dialog that pops up. So I haven't clicked anything else yet. If I left click, I might lose this. But if I press F6, or if I just click on this arrow, it'll give me the ability to tweak the parameters on this on instantiation. So once I've made it, I have this one-time opportunity to tweak these parameters. So things like how many vertices do I want to have? So how round is it? Okay, etc. And by the way, sorry, one other thing. While I'm dragging a field, or while I'm making a movement or a transformation or a rotation, if I want a finer movement, I can hold down the Shift key. Okay, so while I'm scrubbing through this value, I can hold down the Shift key. Oops, the Shift key. And it will move more slowly, I think. Is it not? Yeah, it's moving slower. It's still moving fast, but it is moving a little bit slower. Okay, so we have all these different parameters that we can tweak. We can tweak its location, its rotation, etc. Okay. And then once I click off the object, I no longer can tweak those parameters. They're not available to me anymore. All right. And I think that is it. So one other thing, let's add one other object. Yeah, so I can also bring up this menu, this dialog, by tapping F6. So right when I made something, I can tap it. Oh, never mind. Weird. That doesn't work. Sorry, my apologies. F6 does not work anymore. So I guess I just have to click on this. There might be a key binding for it. I just do not know what it is. But it used to be F6. But I can click on it and I can basically tweak things like so. All right, so that's it for now. Let's take a short break, and then let's resume at 10:40. Okay. Actually, you know what? Sorry, guys. Let's keep going. But we will. We'll. Deathloop. I don't know what that is. So Hyder, I'll answer that in question. But let's keep going. We'll just spend this next 5 to 10 minutes. We'll just reinforce what we've learned. so we won't cover new things. So if you want to go grab some food, go for it. But we'll keep going and just kind of reinforce, experiment with some of these simple tools and kind of functionalities that we've looked at. And we'll maybe build a basic object using that. Yeah, so we're taking a break, but I'm just conscious of like our YouTube stream because I don't want to have like 10 minutes of dead time in the middle of it, you know. So we can try to maybe have a break. We can wrap up a little earlier if that works for you guys as well. But yeah, by all means, go grab some food. I won't cover anything brand new until 10:40 around there. Okay. So as long as you're back, ready to kind of go by then, we'll be good. The top left there is the add button, or you can yes. All right. So tell me about Deathloop. What is Deathloop? Let me look it up. Oh, cool. Oh, I saw this. I saw the art for this game, and I was like, that looks good. Okay. Is it fun? Oh, I like Dishonored. Interesting. I'm just looking at the reviews. They said it's similar to Dishonored. Is that the case? Cool, cool, cool. Yeah, I'll check that out. Fortunately, wow, very cool. 10 out of 10. Wow, nice. Oh, cool, cool. Yeah, I'll probably pick it up then for sure. I've, I don't play that many games. I just check them out to see what they look like more than anything. And, started up Control, the other day, which looks awesome. Yeah, so you're gonna make a dagger, Mohit. Yeah, we'll look at making more sophisticated models after our short break here. I am gonna kind of step away for just a moment, but I will be back, and then we'll again do some recap on some of these some of what we covered in the first half of class here, and then after that. At 10:40, we'll start looking at some of the new, some more new tools. Okay. All right. I'll be right back. All right, guys. Okay, I'm back. All right, guys. So let's do a little bit of recap, and then we'll look at some new things. Okay. So again, left click to select, and sorry, just prior to that, if you missed it, preferences. Go to key map and select with mouse button to left. Again, I've in the past used right, and I don't know if setting it to left is going to change up some weird things for me, but I'm taking a leap of faith here and hoping that it doesn't. So I'll just kind of be on the same page with you guys. So left to select, and we're going to go to input. We're going to make sure we set emulate 3-button mouse on. Even if we have a mouse, it's just good to have this on. If you're on a laptop, absolutely you need this, right? And what that does, that allows you to again replace the middle mouse tumble, control middle mouse zoom, and shift middle mouse pan with you can replace the middle mouse, all the middle mouse elements with alt and left mouse. So alt and left mouse to tumble, control alt and left mouse to zoom, shift alt and left mouse to pan. Okay. Then to select, because we changed it, left mouse on things to select. We can lasso select, or we can change that lasso to a box mode. It's box mode by default. We can set that to box mode, and we can just select things like so. Right? To drop our selection, we have multiple ways of doing so. We can left click and drag in an open space. We can hold down Alt and then press A to clear the selection. We can press A really quickly 2 times. Double tap A to also drop that selection. All right, and then of course, if we want to only drop certain things, we can hold down Control and just marquee select that thing, right? Or those things. Okay. One of the, I think the biggest things to kind of familiarize ourselves with in 3D, at least it was for me, is getting to the right angle, right? Changing the view. So in between each operation, you want to get the optimal kind of vantage point. So in 2D applications, you just press spacebar, right, and you can kind of pan around. It's just like the 2 dimensions you're working in, right? So you're just kind of moving up, and you're moving left and right, and you're moving down, and that's it. But in a 3D application, there might be something behind this box that I need to rotate around to find it, right? And all that. So, sometimes you need to do something from the top. Sometimes you need to do something from the side. Sometimes you need to do something from below, right? And it's just kind of it's an added extra step in between everything that you want to do that, sometimes makes the process feel longer and slower, but it's really just something you have to embrace, accept, and get used to. There's no real way around it. All right. Okay, so we got about 1 more minute, and then we'll get going again. But let me just kind of clear some of these things out. Okay, so I just have this one box. Let's add another object. Shift A. Oops, Shift A. Let's make a cone. Whoops. Shift A. Mesh. Cone. We'll go into our settings here. Let's set this to 4. Whoops. We'll change the bottom radius. Let's rotate it on Z, whoops, here by 45 degrees. Whoops, I moved it. I meant to rotate it, sorry. Change this to 45. Okay, and I know where this thing is. I think it's about 5 meters up. And let's go. Oops. So this is why, like, when I work with programmers and they're like, oh, just, you know, enter your values here and it'll move your thing. I'm like, oh, that feels very trial and error, man. Like, I can't really get into it. So here we have a simple house, right? Using a box and a cone. A cone that I've, when I made it, I said to only use for vertices for the radius here. All right, and then I could shift select both of these. Shift D to duplicate. Press Shift Z to move it around. RZ here. Shift D, Shift Z. RZ. And I have a little village of houses or what have you. All right, so that at this stage, that's the kind of stuff that we're able to do, right? But we want to go a little more in depth than that. All right, so we're gonna get started. We're gonna do some more in depth modeling. Instead of just relying on such primitive shapes, we're going to go a little deeper. But before we do that, let's kind of cover a little bit more about the interface. And I may have covered some of this last year, but I'll do it again. We have different viewports here. So we have our 3D viewport. We have our what's called our our outliner, which basically gives us like a snapshot overview of all of the elements in our scene. We have our properties menu here, which based on what I have selected, it's dynamic. It will change. The first few options will not change. These white icons, they're kind of more scene level. They're global, and this has to do with like rendering and, you know, scene settings and things like that. And this one is like like the world settings, like what color is the backdrop, what color is the sky, and all that kind of stuff. But then everything below that is generally based on whatever I have selected here. So this orange one is the object parameters. So all like the object rotations and scale and everything like that. In addition to some other things which we won't get into just yet. Then we have modifiers. So we have like the ability to kind of like non-destructively change our objects. So we can add things called modifiers. So I'll give you an example. Selecting this flat plane here, add a modifier. And if you want to try this, you can add a plane as well. So go to add mesh, go to plane, and it'll add a plane in your scene. Select that plane. Go to add modifier, the wrench tool. Okay, add modifier, and we can go to solidify. And what that basically gives us is it basically solidifies our object. Gives us thickness to it that we can change, and we can turn on and off. We can delete this and it's back to our regular plane. So we're not really changing the object. So I can add a solidify modifier to a flat mesh, like so. Increase the thickness here. I can add another modifier like a bevel modifier, like so. And so I see this stack of modifiers. I can can change the amount of the bevel there, like the depth of the bevel, the roundness of that bevel. And then I can add another modifier. I can add a array modifier, for example, which allows me to just basically make a whole bunch of these models, and I can choose how they stack. Like I can say the factor is 1. They'll just be adjacent to one another. But if I set that greater than 1, they'll kind of overlap each other. And this is basically, you can think of this as X, Y, Z. Well, it says here X, so this is on the X axis. If I want them to move up or down or move on the Y axis as well, I can do so, and the Z axis additionally. Okay. I can add another array modifier. So here we have our simple array. You guys from programming, you'll know what an array is: 0, 1, 2, 3. But I can have an array of arrays, right? And so I can add another set of arrays, but this time going in the y-axis, right? And I can set the count here to 4, right? And now, like any change that I make to my first object, it will kind of be applied to all the others. So this is a nice non-destructive way to work. So I can go into my solidify modifier, I can change the thickness there, right? So there's a lot of really interesting things that we can start doing simply with modifiers. Okay, and then if I'm like, oh, you know, I don't want any of that, let me delete these, I can just delete them. Okay, I can also change the order of things, but yeah, let's just delete them. Okay, so again, we can make our models a little more sophisticated by using modifiers. Here we don't really have to worry about this. This is if we're adding particles, but if we did want to, we could say add hair particles to our mesh here, right? So if you wanted to like have realistic hair or things like that, we can change the number. You can change the length. And you can kind of make things a little more dynamic. So anyways, there may be cases where you want to do this. I could set it to be, instead of actual hairs, I could set it to be geometry. So I could take some other geometry in my scene and I can assign it to be that. The only problem with this is it can start to bog down our scene a little bit, and I just have to remember where in here that option is. Render. Okay, so render, I believe, no. Oh, render as object instead of path, object, and then we will choose the object. So we can use this eyedropper and say make it these cones. You see those cones show up on our mesh. They're rotated the wrong way, but yeah, that's we're probably not going to use this, but that's what that is. Let us delete this. So my particle settings, I'll just hit the minus here and it will delete that. The next one down in our properties is physics. So if you wanted to do like simulations and things like that, you'll probably want to work in here. So if you want to do soft body, if you want to have like a beanbag chair or something like that that drops and falls, or if you want cloth, or if you want something to break, this is where you will kind of start playing around. Constraints is kind of setting up like different parameters. So copy rotation, for example, we can tell this type of copy rotation So you can tell it to copy the rotation of this. So if I rotate this, that will rotate with it. So that's what constraints are. Rigging is really based on a lot on constraints. So you'll see when we get to rigging, we're going to talk quite a lot about using constraints. And there's different kinds of constraints. When we use a rig, when we have an armature, we're going to have bone constraints. Here we have all of our vertex level options. So you may or may not remember, but if we dive into an object, if we have something selected, we can go in, we have different modes. One of the most useful being edit mode, where we can now, all those things we were doing before, we can do it at the component level. So I can select a vertice, right? Using the same selection methods. I do have different options here. So I have vertex selection, edge selection, and face selection, which you can also use the 1, 2, and 3 key on your keyboard. The 1, 2, and 3 above the QWE on your QWERTY keyboard will allow you to quickly change, and then you can press G to move one of these guys, right? Or select a couple and rotate them, or scale them. Okay, so now you can get a funky house. You don't have to have a regular, boring, normal house. You can kind of get something a little bit more interesting, a little bit more dynamic. Okay. Everyone still with me? All right, and then the last option here is our material settings. So this is where we can assign a unique material. So basically you can say, I want this to look like red metal, or I want this to look like, you know, brown plastic, or something like that. This is where we can do that. So you can select an object, you can hit new here, okay, in our materials, press new, give our material a name, let's call it roof, change the color. We're not going to see these changes just yet. We'll have to change our render mode. So we have a viewport shading modes up here. Okay, so we want to set to either to this one or this one. These last two. To see what the result of this color change. Okay, well, again, we can change the color. We can say how metallic is this object, or is it not metallic. We can change its specularity, we can change its roughness. Okay, so a lot of different options that we have to play with here. Excuse me. Okay. And that's just an overview. And then the last piece is that any window can be changed into any other kind of window. I'm just going to go back to my regular 3D model view. This is a simple scene, but I can hear my computer starting to slow down a little bit, which is weird. It really should, but that's okay. So yeah, so any of these little dialogues, you'll see that if we hover between, we can resize, right? And I can change one window into any other kind of window. So in the top left, or sometimes in the bottom left, we'll see a little drop down. And we'll see that I can change this, for example, into another outliner, or I can change it into a 3D viewport. So you can really customize your workspace, however you want. But generally speaking, the way it is, you want to have your properties, you want to have your outliner, you want to have your 3D viewport. Animation, if you're not doing animation, you probably don't need this. There will be times when you change this to a UV editor window. If you're doing some scripting, you can change this into a Python window where you can access all the operations using Python, and it'll even give you, I think this is new, where it's giving you the actual code operation. View 3d.select, or select view 3d.select, and if I were to press G here, move transform.translate. So it's basically kind of giving you like what that is. We could also use a info. Info will basically give me the it'll give me the command as well. So every operation I do, you'll see that it's going to list it here. So bpy.ops.transform.rotate, and then the value of the rotation on the axis, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so those of you who want to maybe develop tools or dig deeper, this is the this kind of reveals to some degree like kind of what's happening with each button press that you make. But let's set this back to a timeline. All right, so that's just to show that we can make any of these like dockable windows into a different type of window. And we can also add new ones. If you go to one of these corners, if you see that little plus symbol, you can drag up into an existing window to create a new window, like so. Okay, and then again, you can make that whatever you want it to be. All right, and then to collapse them or to get rid of one, you can go. So I'm going to make sure that my I get that little plus sign, but I'm favoring the one window over the other. And then I'm going to drag across the border into the adjacent window, and it'll collapse down, like so. Okay, so this is kind of a tricky thing, but again, it's hard to tell, but my cursor here, slightly above this black border line. Okay, slightly above. If I drag upwards, it's going to make a new window. Okay, but if I'm slightly above that black border line and if I drag downwards, it will collapse. Okay, so if you cross the border, it will collapse into the adjacent window, like so. Okay. All right, so again, just some housekeeping. Oh, the stream is lagging. Uh-oh. Let me see what's going on here. Is the stream better now, or is it still problematic? Okay. Better now. Okay, so it's probably just when I change into render mode that it gets freaks out a little bit. I'll have to troubleshoot that. It could be the version of Blender that I'm on. Okay. Yeah, I'll have to figure out what's going on there. Okay, so anyways, that is all that. I'm going to start with a brand new scene. So we'll go to File, New, General. Okay, don't save. Okay, so this is again my default setup, just because I saved it that way. All right. And so what we want to do now is we want to look more specifically at UV unwrap or edit mode modeling. Okay. In addition to this cursor thing that we see, what is that? How do we kind of play with that? So this is kind of one of the dominoes, I guess, that for me, I'm used to being able to reposition this with the left mouse button, you know, but now that I'm using left mouse to select, that basically stays put. So I have to figure out how to reposition that. And I've remembered it's shift right click. So if you hold down the shift key and you right click somewhere, it's going to move this 3D cursor. And the way we think about the 3D cursor is you think of the same as a word processing document. You think of that blinking cursor in a word processor. Wherever that blinking cursor is and you start typing, the text appears from there. So if I have a so if I shift right click, put this here, and you'll notice it's going to stick to the geometry. So it'll align itself to the surface of the geo, you know, that is under my cursor, which is really nice. Okay, so if I put this here, and then if I press Shift A to add a new object, that object will be positioned at my 3D cursor. So that's very useful, and we want to, you know, take advantage of that wherever possible. And we'll see more things with the 3D cursor that we can do later, but that's one thing. Actually, let's touch on one other thing we can do with the 3D cursor. So let's let's put our 3D cursor here. Put it up here in space, and then we'll talk a little bit about these two windows up here. So we have global. Basically, what that means is our transformation space. So right now we're in global transformation space. So if I move and I press Z to move up and down, it's going to look for the global Z axis, which is up and down, right? So it's going to look at the world here, and it's going to align our transformations to the world space. Excuse me. If I change this to local, if I rotate this, now the local object's Z axis is actually facing this diagonal direction. It's not here anymore. So there's a local space. So if you remember, I said every object is a transformation. So if I press G now, and I press Z, you see the Z axis now is aligned to the box, right? And if I press S, Z, you'll see the scale now is aligned here, because my transformation space is set to local. If I set this back to global and press GZ, you'll see that now it's going vertical again. All right, so very important concept to be aware of and leverage, make use of as you are modeling. There are other transformation spaces as well, or transformation orientations: normal, view, and cursor. So if I set this to cursor, my 3D cursor here actually has a transformation on it, has a rotation on it. It's hard to tell, but it's a little bit angled. And I can actually set that manually. So if I press N here in my 3D viewport, I have a lot more of these tabs than you guys, so you should have only a few. I have a lot. But if we go down a couple tabs, you'll see, I think it's 3 down, the third tab down, we'll see 3D cursor, and we'll see its location, we'll see its rotation here. Okay, so we can set this to whatever we want. And then now you'll see that if my transformation space is set to cursor, and I press GY here, you'll see that or GZ here, the Z axis is also rotated based on whatever the rotation of this 3D cursor is. And if I rotate this like so, and press GZ, you'll see that that has rotated again. Let's just zero this out so it's a little clearer. So 10, I rotated by 10. Press GZ, you'll see it's a little offset. If I set this to 45, GZ, let's see, GZ. Oh, because it's just rotating around itself, so I can't really tell. So if I set this to say 15 degrees, GZ, you'll see that it's like that. And if I change this now, we'll see this change some more, like so. All right, You can kind of see what's happening. The 3D cursor doesn't really get bigger, but you can kind of see it rotating there as I scrub through. So you can see as I change its pitch, when I rotate this, it changes as well. Okay, so we can take advantage of this to specify, you know, our rotations, our transformation space. I'll set this back to global. But the other thing we want to look at with our 3D cursor is we can set the pivot points. So we have our transformation orientations here, these two dialogues here on the left, and this one here allows us to change the to the right of that. We have this one that allows us to change the pivot point. Okay, so we can set our pivot point to the 3D cursor. So if I select this, it's not going to pivot around its own object orientation. It's not its own object point. Its pivot point, I should say. It's not going to pivot around that. It's going to pivot around the 3D cursor if I rotate. Okay, because wherever I put the 3D cursor now, it will rotate around that point. It will scale to that point. It'll move from that point. We can't really tell. But that's something that we can be in control of. So if I want this to kind of rotate, rotate around a particular point, I can easily do that. Okay, using this. We also have a few different pivot point modes. We have individual origins. So if I set it to that and I select multiple objects, and let's just move one of them here. So if I have that and I rotate, let's watch what happens. Each object will rotate around its own origin point. So if I press R here, they'll each rotate around their own origin points. Okay, and if I set this to median point, which is a default, and I rotate, you see they rotate as a group around a median point. Okay, median point and bounding box are similar, not always exactly the same. Bounding box draws a box around our objects, whereas median point will find the average position of our selection. So it's favoring these three. If I move this over here, rotate, you'll see it's favoring these four even more. Okay, whereas if I set it to bounding box, it's going to be a little bit more, it's going to take a direct box and it's going to find the dead center of that box. It's hard to tell based on the angle, but yeah. Okay. And then there's active elements. So we talked at the very beginning about active elements, and this is extremely useful. There might be a case here where, you know, we want to rotate around a specific object. So if I want them all to rotate around this guy, make sure he's the active object, and I can rotate, and you'll see it's rotating around its pivot point. Right? And now this is the active object, so it's going to rotate around that one's pivot point, right? And so on and so on. Okay, so we have access to each of these different rotation modes, which are very, dependent on the use case that we need, and then we can kind of get the optimal transformation or rotation that we would want to do. Yes, and Hyder thinks if you are in global space mode, and you want to move and you want to constrain it to the local Z axis, I can tap Z 2 times. Okay, and the second tap will result in it going towards its local rotation, local transform. Okay, one other kind of neat thing is we also have a custom space. So say I rotate this to a weird angle and I want to move everything else, if this is the local Z, I want everything to move to this one's local Z. What I can do is I can go to global and I can hit this plus, or sorry, not global, but the transform orientations drop down. If I hit this plus, I can make my own space. So I can call this Gavin custom. All right, and now this, if I move this, its Z orientation will be the same as whatever this one was at the time of my creation. I can now rotate this from what it was previously. It'll stay with the Z orientation it was at the time that I set that custom space transformation. Okay, so it's not the same as local. If I set this to local, see, it's going to go like that. But if I set this back to Gavin custom, GZ will give me that. Okay. Oh, and let me turn on my screencast keys, guys. Thanks. Oh, it is on. Okay. Is it? No, it's not. I have to check it off and check it back on. All right. So that's a lot of power. Okay, a lot of power. We're not quite to the point where we need that yet, but we will get there soon enough. All right. So I think at this point we can start looking at object or edit mode modeling. So what I'm going to do, make sure I'm in object mode. Select everything. How do we select everything? You guys remember? Give me a moment. Okay, we press A to select everything. We press X to delete everything. Okay, now we have this tricky problem of a 3D cursor that we've started moving around by holding down Shift and right mouse. Hold down Shift and tap right mouse to position our 3D cursor, but we want it to go back in the center of our world here. Okay, so to do that we can press Shift C. Okay, Shift C will just immediately just snap our 3D cursor to the center of our space. All right. So why do we do that? Because when we have a blank scene, you know, unless we have a good reason not to, generally speaking, we want to add our new objects in the center of our universe here, the center of the space, this X, Y, Z space. All right. So I'm going to go ahead here and press Shift A. Okay, and we're going to make a simple dagger, right? So we're just going to kind of sketch out a dagger, model a dagger, and kind of look at what that process looks like. Yep. So Alt Shift S. Let's see. Okay, so Shift S allows you to bring up this dialog where you can choose where you want the cursor to go. So you can go cursor to world origin, cursor to selected. We will absolutely need this at some point, especially when we get into rigging. And also we'll need this when we do modular asset creation. But for now, yeah, instead of going through Shift S and then going cursor to world origin, we can just press Shift C. Yeah, it's way faster. Okay. All right, so let's press Shift A. Let's add a new object. Shift A to add. Okay, let's add a cube. Okay. Now let's start really simple. But what we're gonna do, well, by the way, if you want to center your rotation around your selection, you can press the decimal on your numpad. If you do not have a numpad, you can't do this, or not as easily. But you want to press decimal on the numpad. I think there might be an option here in view as well. If there's another way to do it, I can't remember what it is, to be honest with you. But I can just press decimal on my numpad, and you'll see it'll center my object. It'll zoom me in on it, and it'll make the center of my tumbles. Really, really useful. It's kind of an awkward placement. I don't like reaching all the way across my keyboard to press press that button, but that's what it is. Incidentally, some people use the numpad for rotation navigation, so I can use the 4, 6, 8, and 2 to kind of rotate around my object. I can press 1, 3, 7, and 9 to kind of go to different views on the object. You can hold down Shift. What is it, Shift or is it Control? Shift, or so Control and 4 and 6 to pan left and right. 8 and 2 to pan up and down. This is all in the numpad, by the way. So yeah, and Shift 4 and 6 to rotate the view. So a lot of like interesting things. If you want to use your keyboard, you can do that. But yeah, so beyond that, let's kind of jump in here, and we'll go into from object mode. Okay, so this is kind of marks the start of us kind of diving a little deeper and actually making a more customized geometry. Okay, so we're gonna go from object mode into edit mode here. And remember, up here we have the ability to select from vertices, edges, or faces. You can also use 1, okay, 2, and 3 on our numpad, or sorry, on our number line above the QWE to change those values. Okay, again, all the same things that we've been doing work here. So Alt A to drop selection works, A to select everything works, Shift D will work here. Okay, even if I select only a couple vertices and press Shift D, I can duplicate that. If I select one vertice and move it, I can just duplicate just one vertice and have a floating point. But as you can imagine, there are a whole bunch of other functionalities that we'll need while working with components of geometry, because sometimes we want to add things together. And when we delete things, we have more options. So I'm going to press X here with these things I just duplicated. And now when I press X, you see I get to delete options, a lot more options. So I'm going to choose delete vertices in this case. And it'll just delete those. Okay, and I encourage you guys to experiment with what happens when you delete things. If I select one vertice here, okay, on this cube, and I press X and I delete vertice, it actually deletes all the faces that were connected to that vertice. Okay, whereas if I press X and I say delete edges, nothing happens. If I say delete faces, nothing happens. Okay, if I go to dissolve vertices, it tries to keep the polygon and just delete dissolve the vertice. So it kind of gives us a weird result. Control Z to undo that. X here, dissolve edges, nothing happens. Dissolve faces, nothing happens. If I select two vertices here, and I go to dissolve vertices, it's trying to do the same thing. So it looks okay, but it's actually kind of problematic, this setup here. But if I had here, and sorry, I don't want to go too quickly. I think I'm starting to speed up maybe a little bit too much, which I do not want to do. So we'll get to the delete options a little bit more in depth, but for now, suffice it to say that we have a lot more control over what we want to delete, how we want to delete it, etc. We have delete options, which just delete the things. Dissolve options, which try to maintain as much of the form as possible. So if I do dissolve edges there, for example, you'll see that we get something like this. Dissolve edges is something that we'll probably use quite a lot. But yeah. So let's talk through another set of like tools and options that we have. So again, we know how to marquee select to select select things. Be aware that if I can't see it and I try to select it, it won't get selected. It'll only select the things that are facing. Okay, so any vert that is further away, it won't select. I do have an option that I can click on, which is this one, toggle X-ray. Okay, up here. If I turn that on, I can also press Alt Z. Oh, that brings up my G-force settings. Never mind. So I can click on this, and then now I can select through an object. Okay. Well, by default, it won't select anything that is blocked from view. We can also hover over something. We can hover over something and tap the L key, and it'll select everything that's linked to what's underneath my cursor. Okay, it's really, really useful. So if I hover over this and just tap L, you'll see it'll select all the linked aspects of that mesh. Okay, I'm going to select face mode here. Select one of these faces, maybe a few of these faces, and press Shift D just to duplicate those. Okay, select this, Shift D again. Okay, and now you'll see I can drop my selection, hover over anything, press L. You'll see it just select whatever is connected to that particular mesh. Okay, this is really useful because we might be in a situation here like where it's not easy to select the back. I don't want to select everything by pressing A, right? I don't want to just kind of get the front and then have to rotate to the back. You know, I want to just select whatever this thing is. So I can tap L, boom, select it. Okay, this is in object mode. Remember, this is all in object mode. So be certain, guys, you're not in object mode anymore. You're in edit mode. Sorry, did I say this is in object mode? This is in edit mode. Sorry, this is in edit mode. So just make sure you're in edit mode. Okay. All right. Okay. And let's go ahead and delete these. X, delete. Select this. L, X, delete vertices. All right. So we have this. What we want to do. Actually, one more thing in preferences we want to turn on if it's not on by default. So go up to edit one more time. Edit, preferences, and we're going to go to add-ons. So Blender, what makes Blender powerful is that it's an open source tool, and it has a whole host of like add-ons made by the community. Some paid, some free, but they really extend the functionality of the program. And one of those add-ons that's so useful is called Loop Tools. So we're going to just search here for Loop Tools. It might be on already, but if it's not, you're going to want to check that on. Okay, this gives us a lot of extra kind of nice functionality that we can use while we're modeling. And I'll show you one of those tools in a moment. Okay, so make sure Loop Tools is checked on. Okay, that's it. You can save this, close it. All right. So one of the things that we need is we often need extra geometry while we're modeling. So what we have here is potentially not enough to get the shapes that we need. You know, if we want to make a dagger, for example, it's going to be really hard to make a dagger with only 8 vertices, right? We're going to need more. So one of the ways we can do that, we can right-click, so we can select, press L here to select, or I can press A. Okay. And now we're going to use our specials menu. So this, for me, when I was right mouse selecting stuff in Blender, would have been the W key, bound to the W key. But for now, it's now just simply bound to the right mouse click. And here we'll also see our loop tools options. All our loop tool options are here. But what we want for now is subdivide. Okay, so by subdivide, you see that it's given me these extra cuts. I could go into this little subdivide dialog and I can say I want more cuts or I want less cuts, and all that. I could change the smoothness and a whole bunch of other different things. But for now, we'll just set it to 1 cut. Okay, so we just have that. I'll press Alt A to go back to what we have. Okay, and on the y-axis here, so looking for this green axis, I'm just going to select the faces here. Okay, so make sure you're in face selection mode. So my here, use 1 word, not 2 words. So loop tools, all 1 word. Or just loop, and you should see it. Oh yeah, it's not spacebar search. It's edit, preferences, add-ons. Search in here. I just searched for loop. Okay. All right, so once you have loop tools installed, you can, again, bring up your specials with these 4 faces selected on the y-axis. Okay, this green axis is the y. Red is X, blue is Z. We're going to go here to loop tools and we're going to hit circle. And it's going to circularize that selection. Okay, we can do the same thing here. And hit circle. Okay, I'm also going to get this edge loop. Interesting. Okay, so here is where, interesting. So here is where switching to left mouse has kind of thrown me a curveball. I'm used to being able to hold down Alt and right-clicking to select a loop, but it doesn't work that way anymore. Now I have to double-click on a edge to get a loop. So let's back up. So we have a question. I'm just going to back up, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z. So what I did, I have this regular cube. Press A to select everything, or hover over it and press L to select everything that's linked. Okay. And then what I did is I pressed right click to bring up my specials, and then there's an option here for subdivide. Click on that. It's going to subdivide each of these faces that I have selected. Okay, and then now on the y-axis, I'm just going to, in face mode, select certain faces. I can do 2 sides at once. I'm going to right click again, get my loop tools, and I'm going to hit circularize or circle. Okay. And I could have made a cylinder. I could have started with a cylinder, but I wanted to show you guys how loop tools works. What we can do with it, how valuable it actually is. And now I'm going to change to edge mode. Okay. I'm going to select this edge loop by double clicking on the edge, one of the edges. Okay. I'm going to bring up my specials menu again, go to loop tools and hit circle again. So how did I subdivide? I select my geometry. Yeah, it only subdivide what you have selected. Yes, right click and then subdivide. All right. So we looked at one method of adding extra geometry, which is to subdivide whatever we have selected. Very, very useful, but also a little bit of a heavy-handed method. It's not as delicate and nuanced or precise as some other methods. Okay, so Tim, try pressing W. If you have right mouse as your default selection mode, try. You can see the object context menu. How do you subdivide? Right click. Can't see which menu. You can't see the loop tools menu. If you can't see the loop tools, you want to go to edit, preferences, add-ons, and search for loop tools. Make sure enabled add-ons is unchecked. Make sure this is set to all, and then go for a loop. You should see loop tools there. Okay. All right, Tim, let me know if that works for you. Okay. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we are going to extrude something out. Okay, so what is extrusion? Extrusion is basically adding extra geometry in a certain spot. Excuse me. So it's very easy. All we have to do is tap the E key. Have something selected, and then usually faces. Doesn't have to be faces. We can extrude a vertice or an edge. But generally speaking, it'll be a set of faces. We'll press E, and it'll extrude it along with the normal of whatever you had selected. Okay, so we can basically extrude it out here. So we want to start with a handle of our dagger. We can shape it up after. But let's extrude it a little bit like so. We can also then maybe scale it down a little bit. Extrude it out some more. Excuse me. Okay. Then maybe a little bit more. So I'm just tapping E to extrude, and then left click to confirm that extrusion. E to extrude again, and then left click to confirm. Okay, let's tap E one more time, extrude outwards, like so. Let's just move that out. G, Y here, just to move it out a little bit further. All right. So with these faces selected, so I'm going to scale this down. So let's just scale this down really small. We won't quite make it a point just yet, but we'll scale it down really small. Okay, so we have a bit of a dagger shape. All right, so Joshua, where did you get stuck? Can't see loop tools. Tim, do you want to maybe share your screen on Google Meet? Okay, and we'll just troubleshoot what's going on. Okay. All right, so
can you see my page?
yes. So guys, I'm gonna turn my mic
okay.
on. Okay, so you're gonna get double. But yeah, I can see it. So go up to edit.
Yep.
Go to preferences. At the bottom.
Okay, one second. I'm getting double audio.
Okay.
There. Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, what do I do?
Go to edit preferences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then go to add-ons. And then search for loop tools. Okay. Back up. Just no space. Just loop. Just search for loop. There. It's enabled. Okay, so close that window. Now you have to be in edit mode.
Oh, okay, that's probably my problem.
Oh, okay.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
now right click. Yeah.
Okay.
There, it's the top
Thank
one.
you.
Okay, no problem. All right, so guys, if you don't see it, you have to be in edit mode. You won't see it in object mode. You have to be in edit mode in order to see loop tools. Okay. So, all right. So here we have our. Let's just recap. Back up. So we use loop tools to circularize these faces, right? These selection of faces. Let's back up. Okay, so we selected the faces here, and we set circle. We went to edge selection mode, double clicked here, and set that to circle as well. Switch back to face selection mode, select these faces, and we press E to extrude. Okay, so we can press E to extrude, scale down a bit, E to extrude again, and then we'll do E to extrude one more time. G here, G and then Y, and then just scale down really pretty small, not all the way down, but pretty small for now. And we'll do the handle for our dagger. So we can get these sides, either side here. Okay. What we're going to do, we're going to press E. Okay. And we don't want it to go into move mode. We want it to go into scale mode. So we immediately press S. Okay. And then we're immediately also going to press X. Okay. So it scales only on the X axis. Like so. Okay. And let's scale it one more time. Let's scale it, whoops, not rotate it. Oh, and I accidentally had this still selected. So be careful of that. That was a mistake on my part. I don't want this to still be selected. And you notice I just did something there. I just moved this. And then I right-clicked immediately. Why did I do that? Because I need to check for something. What do I need to check for? Sometimes if you press extrude, if you tap E, and then you right click immediately, you think you undid it. But there's actually still an extrusion there. It's just hidden. So now if I press G, I see that, oh, that extrusion never got applied. Or it got applied, but it never got transformed. So that'll mess me up down the road. So I need to be careful of that. It's a stumbling block in Blender for sure. So now with these selected, I've already extruded it, but I haven't transformed. Let's transform now. So I'm going to scale it. Scale on X. Okay. I'm going to scale on Y. And I'll press G, and I'll move on Y. GY, like so. Okay, there are a few other things that we can look at doing. I can go to change this from median point to individual origins. And let's say I press S, scale on X now. See, because it's individual origins, it won't scale to the center point. It's gonna they're gonna each scale along their own polygon axis. Okay, so it's, individual origins is really useful for certain operations. Okay, now we'll go back to median point. We almost never want to stay on individual origins. We'll use it momentarily and then kind of go back to what we had before. And that'll just scale vertically a little bit as well. Okay, so here we have a very, 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 very simple dagger, but let's make it a little nicer. I am going to add an edge loop. So this option we have to add an edge loop and slide it by pressing Control R, or there's an option here called loop cut. Sorry, loop cut and slide. So I can press Control R here, hovering over here, and I'm gonna get a yellow line giving me a preview of where this is going to be. While it's still a yellow line, without left clicking, you can see I can scroll on my mouse wheel to make more preview cuts, or scroll back down to just get the one. I just want one for now. So once I'm happy with this, I can press enter, and then it goes into slide mode. And so basically now I can slide this cut up and down the length of those edges. Okay, so actually I want to put this close to the base here. Excuse me. I'm going to just bring it right up until I can't drag it anymore. Left click to confirm that, and then scale it down like so. And actually I'm going to scale this on Z. So S is Z. Scale it on the Z axis. I'll just do SX a little bit just to kind of scale it out on the X axis here. But being mindful that I don't want this corner to overlap this part here, because that'll just kind of give me some problems as well. Alright, so very, very basic dagger. I think the last thing that I want to do, well, we can do a few things. We can kind of have fun with this. And I haven't, I've kept this as a quad very deliberately, or a set of quads very deliberately, because ultimately what I want to do is collapse this down into a point. But for now we'll keep it as is, because we can easily add some more edge loops. If this was a point, I wouldn't be able to add edge loops to that, so you'll see. I set this to if I were to extrude this one more time. And the way I can turn this into a point, I can collapse this. So Ricardo, you can scale smaller by pressing left, or dragging your mouse, the cursor left instead of right, or more towards the center of your scale transformation. So Joshua, Joshua, to select an edge, you have to switch into edge mode first. Okay, so you can press the 2. So 1, 2, and 3 allow you to switch between vert, edge, and face selection mode. Or you also have these guys up here. Right here, here, and here. Alright, so 1, 2, 3 above the QWE on your QWERTY keyboard. Okay. So you can only select edges if you are in edge selection mode. And then to select an edge loop, you have to double click on one of the edges. Double click does not work for you guys. Interesting. So, Ricardo, I set my transformation, my pivot mode. I tweaked my pivot mode. You might have missed that, but I changed it at one point to individual origins. So you might have missed that part. All right. So what I've done here is I've just extruded this last little tip just to demonstrate something to you guys. If I were to collapse this, okay, and to collapse, we press the M key, as in merge, M as in merge. And then if I merge at center or at cursor or collapse, it'll merge all of this selection to a certain spot. I'm just going to hit merge at center, and you'll see it's collapsed all that geometry into a single point. But now, if I want to add edge loops, right, and I press Control R, so if I want to use my loop, cut, and slide, you can't really figure out like where the edge loops are anymore, because it's going from this set of loops to a point, and so there's no clear indication here. But whereas here, because I have a loop and I have a loop, it's easy for it to kind of make that determination. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to press Control R one more time. I'm going to slide my cursor up a few times like this. Okay, and I'm going to just select every other loop, holding down Shift and double clicking on one of these edge loop edges. Oops. Okay, and then I'm just press G and then X here. I'll do the same for the other ones and just move them in the other opposite direction. Okay. So this is kind of a cheesy dagger, but we'll introduce one more tool. Maybe have a few too many bends in it. Here I'll show you guys that, and I'll recap that in a moment. With an edge loop selected, guys, I'll show you guys what we can do something called beveling. So by pressing Control B, I can now create these bevels, and if I make the bevel, I can choose the size, and I can use my mouse wheel to scroll to make like more or less kind of transitional kind of points there. Okay, so I can get like kind of a serpentine like dagger shape, like so. Okay, probably a little bit, you know, too much, but just to kind of demonstrate to you guys what is what's possible there. All right, so we had a question: how did I extend these guys out? So let me show you one more time. So in face selection mode, I'm going to select two of these on either side. All right, so everyone paying attention. And I'm going to press E to extrude. Okay, and before I release anything, I'm going to immediately press S, or sorry, before I touch anything else, I'm going to immediately press tap S. Okay, to scale it. Okay, but then I want to constrain the scale movement to the X axis, so then I'm also going to press X. So I scale these guys out like so. Okay, and then with these selected, I'm going to change my pivot point mode to individual origins. Before I do that, if I don't do that and I scale on X, if I scale on X, it's just going to scale back to the center. It's going to find the average position of all of these selected faces. But if I set this to individual origins instead, it's just going to, each transformation is going to be focused on its own face or its own selection. So if I press SX now, you see how each of these just scales more locally or more towards its own, towards itself. So just this polygon is scaling on X. Just this polygon is scaling on X, etc., etc. Okay? And I could keep this for scale on Z as well. And then SX, like so. All right, and then the last thing I did was SY, just to kind of get it a little thinner, and then GY, move Y on long Y to lift it up like that. Okay, and then you want to switch out away from individual origins back to median point. So you have to switch into face mode. So this is critical. So when we're in object mode, we're just selecting objects, super easy. But when we're in edit mode, we have to be very specific. What do I want to select? Do I want to select vertices, right? Edges, or faces? I strongly recommend just kind of leave your index, middle, and ring fingers on the ring finger on 1, the middle finger on 2, and the index finger of your left hand on 3 on your keyboard, and then you can just easily switch between them. Just cycle through them. I want vertices, let me tap with my ring finger. I want edges, let me tap with my middle finger. I want faces, let me tap with my my index finger. Okay, and then you can really quickly, easily change the mode that you need to select very fast. Okay. I will say here, if you don't mind, if you could just rewind the video and then kind of check that part out. We have about 5 or so minutes left, and I just want to kind of tie this down to some degree. And there's one other thing that I wanted to talk about that we haven't had a chance to do yet, which is how to upload it to Sketchfab. So yeah, I'm just going to undo all this. Oh, and I think I ran out of undos. That's okay. Switch into face mode. Double click on one of these edges. Shift double click on another set of edges or an edge. So I can select not only a loop of edges, but I can actually select a loop of faces. But to select that loop of faces, I have to double click on the edge that is along those loop of perpendicular to that loop of faces. Okay, so I have to double click on that. Okay, so I'm going to double click here, shift double click here, delete these guys, right? Delete these two. And I'll just press X here and I'll delete the faces, not the vertices, but the faces. Okay, so now I have these two gaps. This is a good important thing we can learn here. Switch into edge mode, right? Just tapped the 2 key with my middle finger here. Shift select this other edge. To fill, I press F. Fill to fill the faces. I can double click on one of these edges, it'll select the whole loop. I'm going to press F. Select here, here, F, and F. Okay, last thing I'm going to do, I'm just select these 3 faces. I tap the 3 key with my index finger on my left hand, and I'll just scale this down like so. Okay, let's add 1 or 2 more loop cuts here. Scale that down. I'll just scale this on X a little bit. And then, you know, style to taste, so to speak. Kind of like make it, you know, the shape, the form that you want. I'll show you kind of a neat thing as well here. I can select this, and something we'll do a lot is we can scale to 0 on a certain axis. So I'm going to scale, I'm going to S here, X, right, to scale only on the X axis, and then hit 0, and it'll make it like totally aligned with the X axis. Okay, and then press enter, of course. Do the same thing here. Double click, S, X, 0. Okay, and I'm just gonna select these faces. Okay, and I'll just press G, Y. Can move these guys up a little bit. Let's go back to the edge mode. Click on these guys. And Control B to bevel that out. Not a great looking dagger, you know. I would recommend, you know, we didn't do it, but I would recommend using a reference, right? Have a reference. So for when you guys do it, just make sure you have like a simple sketch or, you know, a reference image that you want to make and follow that. Okay, so so don't necessarily copy what I have here. You know, this is practice, but you need more practice. Make your own dagger. Make a dagger that you like. Maybe make a dagger that you can use in your game this year, if you need daggers or weapons. That being said, whatever you make now, you'll make a much better version, you know, by the end of the term. So this is due on Friday. So this will be due Friday. Christian, I would say please go back, watch the video, and see how I did that. And then last thing, we're pretty much at time, but I'm going to export this. I'm going to go to File, Export. You can export as the OBJ or, you know, FBX. Let's go for OBJ. I'll just put this on my desktop. Okay, so we'll export this, and then we're going to go to Sketchfab. Sketchfab.com. Sketchfab continuously has been going through changes, but basically what you're going to do is going to upload your model. So you set up your account, upload your model. And then you are going to embed a link of this model. Go ahead and publish. I don't want to publish this. But you can view your model. You can kind of tumble through it. You can look at it. You can press 5 to see the wireframe. And then basically you will have a you'll get a link, a shareable link. So I haven't published it. You guys will have to publish yours. But once you publish it, I will be able to review it in our discussion. Okay, so just you can either embed it or you can just share a link to it. Bill will probably be able to kind of walk you guys more through this process of how to embed and everything like that, so that you guys set it up properly. So I'll leave that for your tutorial to kind of get more familiarized with Sketchfab and what all that looks like. But throughout this year, most of your submissions I will expect to see it submitted through Sketchfab. All right. So that's basically it, guys. We will cover this more in depth later, but yeah, that's our first 3D model, a simple dagger. We're really just scratching the surface, but I think we're establishing a very firm and strong foundation, so that as we get into more complex stuff, you guys have a good understanding of, okay, I can use this, I can use that. I need to change my transform orientations for this operation. I need to change my pivot point for this operation, and we will get deeper and deeper into like some of the edit mode modeling specific operations, which is where you're going to spend most of your time in all likelihood. But yeah, I think we got off to a good start. Hopefully not too confusing. Definitely go back, rewatch parts of this video if you are lost on something, or reach out to your classmates or Bill for further advice. Okay. All right, guys. So let's break here. Anyone has questions, just let me know. Email or through Canvas, and I'll try to get back to you as quickly as possible. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'll post this video, a link to this video on Canvas as well. All right. Take care, everybody. And it's due on Friday. So I'll post the, if I haven't already, I'll make sure that the discussion is open. It is open, yes. The discussion is there, and the assignment 1 is also there, so you can review it. We'll talk more about that assignment next class, all right? And we're gonna have a few weeks to do it. We will have in-class weekly activities related to that, so we will kind of work our way towards that together. All right, guys. All right, so take care, everyone. I will see you guys next week. Thanks.